dia, boa tarde, boa noite aos internautas que nos acompanham neste programa Nanotecnologia do Avesso. Hoje, no seu número 351. Fazemos este programa dedicado ao público não especialista, porque é este público que paga as pesquisas sobre nanotecnologia realizadas no Brasil. Também fazemos este programa porque é aqui que nós podemos discutir os impactos da nanotecnologia na sociedade, no meio ambiente, na economia, na ética, no direito, coisa que não são discutidas aonde se faz nanotecnologia no Brasil. Por fim, fazemos este programa porque acreditamos que ser livre é ser bem informado e a divulgação científica contribui, colabora para o aprofundamento da democracia e da cidadania no Brasil. Conforme tínhamos anunciado, estamos conectados com o professor David Berube, da Universidade Estadual da Carolina do Norte, Departamento de Comunicação, que vamos ter um interessante debate com ele aqui hoje. Ok, David, is with you. Please, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, name is David Berube. I'm a professor in science communication at North Carolina State. I run a project called PCOST, which is the Public Communication of Science and Technology, where we do research and engage in a lot of experimental activities to try to determine how the public unravels and makes sense out of complicated science and technology. Most recently, I've joined the Genetic Engineering and Society Center as one of their research fellows. So I've been working a little bit in synthetic biology. But most importantly, I'm now the coordinator for assessment and societal issues for the Research Triangle Nanotechnology Network, which is a large 16-member organization funded by the National Science Foundation. And what it provides is lab space and instruction and outreach. So people who do not have access to the top equipment in the field can use our equipment here at North Carolina State, at UNC Chapel Hill, and at Duke University. So we have 8 labs involved, and I'm pretty much the assessment and public relations person. I've been working in nano since 1990. When the field opened, I was at the University of South Carolina, and one of the first grants given to study societal implications of nanotechnology came to us. And so for the last 25 years, I've been doing a whole series of projects involving public understanding of nanoscience and nanotechnology. Let's go to the first slide.
Okay, is in the screen.
It's why nano. Why is nano so important? Well, the main reason nano is important is for 3 primary reasons. First is the bioavailability of a nanoparticle. In other words, one of the things that's really interesting about nanoparticles is the smaller of any particle is, the smaller it gets, its surface area increases. And so there's more bioavailability. For the pharmaceutical industry, this is great news, because what it means is that every time they design a nanoparticle that they want to use for therapy, they know that it's going to get a good kick out of the amount of money they spend, because every particle will be used effectively. Also, what nano allows us to do is more efficient production. if we can actually build stuff from the bottom up, then we need less natural resources, and that's good for the economy, it's good for the world, and it's especially good for the environment. The last thing that you get from nano is its implications for environment, especially environmental remediation. Put simply, we're learning a lot about how to use nanoparticles to clean up some of our worst chemical dumps, and that's something that we can all look forward to. Next slide.
Okay.
Nano products. Everyone wants to talk about the new nano products. The reality is the nano products that made it to the market so far haven't been very outstanding. They're mostly convenience products. They're ways to make carbon tennis rackets stronger. There's ways to make golf balls better. There's ways to make coatings stronger. And so it's all general improvements on what the business people like to call low-hanging fruit. In other words, these are quick applications they can do with nano. In reality, and the reason there's so much funding by governments in nanoscience is because the return on investment takes so long. And so it takes decades to get a return on investment. So we need some sort of government investment if we're going to get companies to do this level of research. Next slide.
Okay.
When I'm talking to groups about nanoscience and nanotechnology, I often try to highlight the fact that one of the major advancements we'll probably see in the next decade coming from nanoscience is in nanomedicine. There'll be labs on chips. There'll be a whole different class of pharmaceuticals, which somebody called nanoceuticals recently. Also, there's a lot of speculation on producing ways to use everything from robotics to nanoparticles to involved us in diagnosis and therapeutics. The image to the extreme right is not real, it's a cartoon, but it shows what some possibilities might be in nanomedicine. Next slide.
David, about nanomedicine, do you think that nanomedicine is a central point to become the nanotechnology more acceptable for the general people?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. What we have learned in the research we've done over the last few decades is the following. Obviously, people have a fear of death, and whenever you put a product onto a market that provides health and therapeutics, it tends to be well received by the public. Nano may make its first major footprint in the world economy when it introduces a whole line of nano products in medicine and pharmaceuticals. And the public is less likely to be critical about the whole concept of nano since it's associated with medicine. So we're expecting these developments to take place. One of the jobs I do here in the United States is I'm on the Risk Communication Advisory Committee for the Food and Drug Administration. And we're waiting to see how many new products associated with nano will be eventually submitted through the FDA for approval. You know, we're expecting things like prosthetics that are lighter, that are using stronger materials. We're also expecting a whole series of drugs that might be more effective in treating a whole panoply of diseases, especially cancer. The National Cancer Institute here in the United States has invested significantly in trying to urge companies to do research in using nano-enhanced pharmaceuticals as cures for some of the more difficult cancers.
And do you think that with the nano foods is the opposite of nanomedicine?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm convinced that'll be one of the last places we're going to see developments in nanoscience. There's a whole bunch of reasons for this, but the main reason for this is food tends to come in contact with vulnerable populations like children, the elderly, and the infirmed, and people are reticent to expose them to new technologies like nanoscience and nanotechnologies if they have to feed it to their children. And plus, a lot of the developments in nano food have not been really that significant. I mean, you can nanoize flavorings, and colorants, a whole bunch of other components, but it's not like we've come across with a major development in the field. There might be food packaging applications of nanotechnology, which makes a lot of sense, since you can put sensors in food packaging to let you know if the food you're preparing is past its use date and may not be healthy. But in terms of using it in food, in and of itself, it seems unlikely that that's going to occur. There was a lot of companies interested in nano in the food industry about 10 or 15 years ago, and most of them have backed off. And you don't see them advertising nano applications in food anymore. So food's a very important area for a lot of the research we do, because it's an area that's very sensitive and the public is very concerned about it.
Yeah, you can continue.
This slide here is on nano-coatings. And in reality, there's a lot of applications in this field. People are using nano-coatings on glass, so water beads up on it and dirt doesn't stick to it. People are using it in paints. I know here in the United States, the Navy has actually painted the bottom of its ships using nano particles because barnacles don't stick to it. And so you actually have a more efficient ship because you're using less fuel if you don't have the drag that's placed onto the ship by the barnacles and other things that attach themselves to the ships. So nano coatings will always be around, and they're going to get more and more sophisticated, whether it's in clothing or whether it's on buildings or as lubricants, even as we see it in the medical industry a little bit, where folks are looking at ways to improve prosthetic limbs by using nanoparticles to make them much stronger and lighter. And so I think nano coatings will continue to have a major footprint. Next slide.
Okay.
I was just in Hawaii last week talking about alternative energy, and there's quite a bit of research being done. There's journals and books that have been published specifically about nano energy. The major two developments is in the upper left, a whole bunch of developments in fuel cells and batteries. And then in the upper right and lower right, you see developments taking place in solar energy, especially flexible photovoltaics. Current photovoltaics tend to be fragile, and these are much stronger. Also, there's a lot of work that you see in some more exotic alternative energy research areas, including wind and geothermal. That would involve things like coatings and lubricants that you might get from applications involving nanoparticles. Next slide.
And in this area of energy, alternative energy, what is the bottleneck for the nanotechnology solve the problems?
Yeah, the bottleneck's the price of oil. The price of oil is very low. In Doha last Sunday, the petroleum producing countries, OPEC, had an opportunity to actually reduce production in order to stabilize the price, and they decided not to. And so oil will continue to be very, very cheap. And when oil is that cheap, it makes it more difficult to attract investment into alternative energies because they have to compete. And that right now, per gigawatt, it's much more expensive to generate wattage using alternative energies, by and large, than it is to use oil and petroleum. And so until the market improves and makes it more cost effective, we can see that the alternative energy industry is going to have trouble. When I was in Honolulu, I observed, having read in the paper that last week, it was only about a week ago, that a major contract with the Hawaiian electricity producing industry for 3 different solar stations were terminated and ended. Now, there might be a lot of reasons for this, but one of the reasons for this is it's just not cost effective. It's just too expensive right now. But as oil prices go up, which they will, they always do, when oil prices go up, what we can expect is to see more and better investment opportunities in alternative energies, which will reopen the market and encourage more research in these areas.
But if the governments in the United States, Europe, etc., put the tax in petroleum, maybe could be developing the alternative energy in a short time.
Yeah, the problem with that is that gasoline here in the United States is taxed at the state level. It's not taxed at the federal level. Now, the federal government could provide some taxation on oil, but that will run into some problems with the World Trade Organization. And so they're reticent to do that right now. Plus, we're in an election cycle. So really, we're not expecting any taxes for at least another year or so. But you're right. If we made oil more expensive to market, then it would open up opportunities for alternative energies.
Okay. The next
slide. The next slide is pretty simple. Here in the United States, one of the big investors in nanoscience and nanotechnology has been the military. The military has used it for many reasons. There's a project that came out of MIT in Boston called Nanotechnology for the Soldier System. Primary issue here is they want to make batteries lighter, so they're if they are in backpacks or ruckpacks, what happens is they're not as heavy. They're also trying to make the soldier stronger in terms of putting him in a uniform which is safer and hopefully resistant to some sort of bullet damage. There's a lot of research I was fascinated about when I first looked into it, about producing uniforms that form as natural tourniquets as well. So if you do get a soldier wounded, you have a system that can shrink and actually put pressure directly on the wound. There was also a lot of interesting research being done, and this was years ago, on using impregnated silver into uniforms itself as a biocide, which would help. Also, there's a lot of communication developments that you find in the military as well, in terms of providing better computation and communication for soldiers in the field. Then a lot of people like to talk about all these other applications, which may or may not include aircraft and drones and a bunch of other areas, but I mean, most of that information is not available to the public. So all we can do is speculate without really knowing where the applications are.
I would like to see your opinion about the budget for this area, military area, in percentual of the public budget from National Nanotechnology Initiative. You believe that is 25%, 40%? How much?
Oh, I mean, it's almost it's around 40%, but it's pretty high. And we don't know about, we call them we don't know about black budgets. We don't know about money that's being spent for confidential and secret research. So there's a lot we don't know. The internet is full of a lot of speculation about where this is and where it's going. But most folks have no exposure to the level of investment. But over the last 25 years, it's been pretty significant. If you go to the sites of the United States for the National Nano Initiative, if you look at the amount of money that's being spent by all the government agencies, you see that the Department of Defense is fairly high along with the NSF, but those are the two major funding organizations in the United States.
In this project about the soldiers, was in Harvard, no? Or
yeah, it was at MIT.
MIT, yeah.
It's in Boston.
Yeah.
And their website changes every once in a while. But again, who knows how much development is actually taking place? We won't know that until products and people finally report on this. But it's still pretty secretive.
Yeah. Okay.
The next slide.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the big issue. The big issue with nano is how safe it is. The people on the right are two good friends of mine. Vicki Colvin from Brown University, his face is being obscured by Andrew Maynard, who's currently at Arizona State University. We know a lot about nanoparticles, and we know much more than we ever did about how they might affect human health. We know, for example, that you probably should avoid inhaling nanoparticles. We also know that some of the worst research we have, in other words, not enough research, is on gastro-ingestion of nanoparticles, like eating nanoparticles, putting them through your intestinal process. A lot of people were originally very, very concerned about transdermal. In other words, if you put it on your skin, it might somehow migrate into your lymphatic or your circulatory system. But that has received less press over the years. There was a lot of discussion over using nanoparticles in sunscreens. And there was a lot of research on using nano zinc oxides and nano titanium oxides in sunscreens. And the reason is it reflects or deflects ultraviolet A and B. And so it's a better sunscreen. But people were concerned the particles would somehow get through the skin and into the system. There was research done on whether it could get into the body through a hair follicle. There was research done on stressed skin, like skin that would be subject to like a sunburn. There was also some research on broken skin. But by and large, there's not a lot of significant findings in these. It turns out a lot of the particles that go into the sunscreen, as soon as you put them in the sunscreen, even though they're nanoparticles, they agglomerate and aggregate very quickly. And so when you put it on your skin, there's 26 layers of skin as well. So it's very difficult to experience it transdermally. But that doesn't mean it's universally safe. There's still major concern about inhalation. There's major concern about ingestion, eating it. And there's also major concern about its life cycle, like how long it hangs around. Once you put it in, let's say, a polymer and put it into a automobile bumper and then discard the automobile, then the bumper goes to a landfill, and over time, the bumper will degrade, and one wonders what happens at that level. Of course, nanoparticles are really tiny, but we do know that there are some characteristics of nanoparticles that we should watch out for. Next slide.
No, I have one consideration to
Yep.
make in this part. Because we are in Brazil, the dates from federal government show for us that the public money is for new knowledges in science of production, new knowledge for new products, for new process, and he doesn't have money to make new knowledge in science of impact. Here in Brazil, I know that is in maximum 1% for the impacts, and the other 99 for the production science. So I think in the United States is the same, but not in the same proportion.
No, it's about 5 to 9%, depending on how you count it. But it's still about no more than 10% goes into research about its safety and its societal impacts.
And we discuss here with the scientists from nanotechnology, and they put that if the money is public, how to use only in this direction of the science of production. So I think in Brazilian case, we have to change how to use the public money. I don't know in the United States.
I think that argument is made here as well. There's still quite a few people upset that we spend so little. The National Nanotechnology Coordinating Infrastructure, which is the last big, was funded at about $60 million. It's 16 locations. One of them is here, but there's 16 locations across the United States. Each one of those is supposed to have a societal research person involved, but a lot of those are not funded very well. I think here in North Carolina, we fund it very well, but it's probably because my group's here, right? And everybody knows about us, and so they use us heavily. So we have a lot of an input here. But across the country, it's very spotty. Some places you get a lot of research taking place, other places you don't. Right now, the only active research grants that are significant coming out of the NSF are for environmental impact of nanotechnology. There's a site at Duke down the road here in North Carolina, and there's another site at UCLA on the West Coast. But a lot of the research that's taking place in nanoparticles is being funded in a lot. That's why it's so hard to get a good amount, the exact amount, because some of it's funded with the NIH, some of it's funded with the National Science Foundation, some of it's funded through private foundations. So there's a lot of different folks doing a lot of different types of research. But by and large, in the societal area, the bulk of the research, most of it, goes to health and safety and environmental implications. It doesn't go into societal issues other than those health and environmental ones.
Okay, you can continue. The next.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Next slide, you get to see some research we did. This is an article. This is from an article we published about 2.5 years ago now, 2 years ago. We did a bunch of expert studies, and we contacted, I think it was 40 experts, and asked them if they would suggest what the problems might be with nanoparticles. And so they told us what they thought the problems were, and then we looked at all of the responses, and then we added them together. We sent them back out. We asked them to correct the results. And so we went through sets of these, and then eventually we were able to report that these are the concerns that the experts have. The primary concern experts have is that nanoparticles are reactive. In other words, they tend to have a surface charge to them, and that doesn't bode well for the contact of nanoparticles with some cells in the human body. The second is its size. Because they're so small, they tend to be able to get through places like the blood-brain barrier and the placental barrier, which are two places where drugs have a hard time getting to the brain and to a fetus, which is, I guess, good. But the new pharmaceuticals industries, the pharmaceutical industry is looking at how to take advantage of this in terms of producing brain therapies. And then all the other ones from 3 all the way through 13, these are all just areas that they're concerned about. And so when we published this, we published it in order to get responses from experts, and it's a well-read article, and it's got a lot of people reading it and citing it, and it's one of the first few articles that actually looked at what was it about nanoparticles. That's a bit of a problem. Ready for the next slide?
Okay, I have one question for this.
Yeah.
The importance.
Yes.
What is the more importance? Is reactivity after size, or in the end porosity or sort of?
Oh, no. The most important one is reactivity.
Okay.
Then it goes down. 1 is the worst, 13 is the less troublesome.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the
Next
next.
slide.
Yeah.
All right. The problem we have with talking to the public about things like nanoscience is we're all cognitive misers. And what that means is that we don't spend a lot of time and effort to try to understand complex things. You know, back in the 50s, folks in communication were convinced that the public were like scientists, and in reality, they're not. Most of the current research suggests, if you look at the second bullet here, that we're suffering from a huge amount of information overload. There's so much information out there, the public really is bombarded with information. And so it's not that they have too little, it's often they have too much. And it's not that they have too much about nano, it's they have too much, period. And so whenever anything about nanotechnology needs to appear in the public, it has to compete with the overload. And that's not a good thing. Next slide.
Okay.
It becomes more of a problem because in the old days, when you were trying to contact the public, you did it through newspapers. Then you did it through television. Now you do it through digital media. And digital media has a lot of things about it that are remarkable and exciting and earth-changing. But it also allows anybody with an opinion to say almost anything they want. And so with the shift in the media landscape, it becomes very, very difficult to communicate effectively with the public about things like technology, because a lot of the sources they are reading are not providing them with the type of information they want or need. And so this is becoming a very big challenge for people in the fields like I'm in, which is science communication. Next slide.
Okay.
This is a technical slide from another publication we did. You know, usually when you read about where people get information about anything, especially the news, people like to say, oh, they get it from the internet. Well, what we asked people was, where do they get information about environmental health and science? So it's very specific. Then we asked them, where do they go on the internet to get the information? So it's not just they go to the internet. We know where they go to the internet. And when they get there, this is where they get information on environmental health and science and safety. And 3 big ones I put in the circle here were wikis and these personal and news accumulators. Google News is an example of a news accumulator. You register for an RFF when you're on the internet, and they'll give you the news you want. And that's one of the problems. The problem with the way the public's getting news these days is they're getting it through these accumulators, and these accumulators are just sending them the information they know they want to read, not the information that might disagree with their opinion. That's why we have this thing called a confirmation bias. When the public looks for information, they tend to get information that confirms what they already want to know and they already believe is true. And that doesn't provide them with the grounds for a really good debate on things like societal implications or environmental health and safety. And so we have to find new and better ways to reach out to them.
Yeah.
Ready for the next slide?
Yeah.
All right, 4 comments, and then we're almost done. Stakeholders are people who have an interest in a field. So there are stakeholders in nano. There are some stakeholders that are more important than others. There are some stakeholders that if they get the information, they use the information. There are other stakeholders, if they get the information, they ignore it. Some stakeholders are important because they're in the industry. Other stakeholders are important because they try to make sure there's enough information out there so the public can actually understand what's happening. The second issue is we all take shortcuts when we try to understand complex things. The one on the previous slide said there was a confirmation bias. There's a lot of biases. So when the public looks at science and technical information, we need to deal with the fact that they're influenced by a lot of bias. And we have to find a strategic way of working through that. Third, it's all about the frame, how we frame nano. You mentioned earlier that you thought developments in medical nano might be good for the industry. Yeah, if nano is framed as medical nano, it's going to come out smelling very well. If the developments that occur, however, were things like nano food, that would have been a different frame, and that frame might be a bit of a problem. And finally, the public's out there. Our research indicates we have to go to them. I know in the United States we have a lot of these meetings where we invite the public in. You know, we get money from the National Science Foundation, we hold workshops, and that's nice, it's good for the public who can get there. But by and large, we need to talk to the public where the public generally goes. So we did a bunch of studies and a bunch of focus groups where we went to places like church basements and places where people already meet, and we started dialogues there. And I know they're very popular now in the United States where we have science cafes, where you talk about nano in places like restaurants and even pubs, where people are comfortable with meeting there. And the next slide.
Okay.
This is me. This is the grant that supports me. But the last slide is how to reach me.
Yeah.
So the last slide is the one that says, here's our email addresses and here's our web addresses. And if anyone in the audience wants to contact us, we have offices in that beautiful building you see in the bottom left. And we have graduate students who work here just to answer some of the questions the public may have.
Okay. But
That's
I have many questions. But
okay, let's start.
Yeah, our informal debate. Okay. This is possible to have the stakeholders have some control in the development of the nanotechnology.
Is it possible?
The stakeholders.
It's hard.
It's hard.
If the you're talking public as stakeholders, it's hard for them to influence nanoscience and nanotechnology. I'm not sure what it's like in Brazil, but here in this country we have quite a large government bureaucracy that is pretty much developing the science. We try to involve the public as often as we can, but you know, our public is probably just like the Brazilian public, where you know people are really busy. They've got jobs. They're raising children.
Yeah.
They're going on the day-to-day operation of their lives, and they don't have a lot of the luxury of spending a lot of time and energy working in nanoscience. And there are fewer and fewer non-governmental organizations and nonprofits in the United States who have paid any interest in nano on any level whatsoever. There was a time when there were many, and over the years they've been falling away one by one.
There is no National Science Foundation fund for this kind of the organization, no?
Well, there's a little bit. not a lot, but there's some. In the National Science Foundation, there's a category called SBE. It's Social Behavioral Economic. It's a component of the National Science Foundation, and they have a set of grants that they give out. And some are pretty large. And then there's some funding that takes place with the National Nanotechnology Initiative, but that's funding very specific projects, like the one I'm doing here with Chapel Hill and Duke and North Carolina State.
Okay, but what is the relationship between the academy, the scientists, and the public that is not a specialist in nanotechnology?
It's mixed. If you look at university cities in the United States, the university has a lot of opportunities for outreach. I mean, we do, everything from nano days for students. We have regular tours of our laboratories. We have symposium and workshops. We do a lot of outreach because that's what universities do. And so university cities have pretty good outreach. But, the newspapers used to cover science and technology, and they pretty much aren't covering that much anymore. You see very little of it on TV unless it's a documentary. So there's less and less. The museums in the United States have done a remarkable job in reaching out to young populations. But, there's just a limited amount of money to do this, and there's also a limited amount of the public who's that interested. Because, most of the public is just too busy. I mean, they're just trying to get through their lives, and to have the luxury to spend that much time in advising, and protesting and participating in nonprofits is a challenge for them.
But the results of the researches made with public money, the final result is public. Any people can see what is the result or no?
Well, they can, but it's not. You got to know where to look. I mean, it's not like it's not like newspapers are covering it. It's not like TV. It's all over the internet. You can find out about the research that's being done. Unfortunately, it's not. What's the word for this? It's not coordinated. In other words, we have one of the projects I'm doing here over the next 5 years is we're trying to put together an inventory of all of the videos, for example, about nano. The ones you do on YouTube, the ones others do. So there's a place the public can turn to at one of our sites, and it'll tell them where they want to go to get more information. We also need more of these coordinated clearinghouses, so when the public wants information, it's easy to get. Because for a lot of the public, it's just difficult to get a lot of this information. And even if they get the information, most of the time it's written at a level of complexity that a general member of the public may not have.
Yeah. Here in Brazil, similar National Science Foundation is CNPq, and that have the grants to make the research. But the final report of each research is not public.
Yeah.
Is in the CNPq, but nobody can see the report. And 2 years ago, the federal government put in law that it's possible the Brazilian people ask for this kind of information. Is the right to know, it's more or less the right to know possibility, no? But if you go to the site of the CNPq, you cannot see the information about the final reports about any project of nanotechnology.
It's easier to see them here. That's for sure. It's a lot easier to see them here. It does take time for government reports to come out, but they do come out. You know, it may take a year or two, but you'll get it eventually. There's a lot of confidential business information you'll never see, right? So if you have a company and the company's researching a nano application they're going to use in a product design, that's confidential business information. But eventually, you know, this stuff gets released. We have the USDA here, which is agriculture. We have the Food and Drug Administration, and we have the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which are 3 government agencies whose job is to unearth that type of information. So you can find it. It's a lot of work, though. I mean, it's, I mean, I've been a professor for a quarter of a century, so it's pretty easy for me to find stuff. And my students are very alert and very smart. They can figure out where to get this information. But, you know, for a member of the general public, it's sometimes difficult. A lot of times when I'm speaking to audiences which are in the general public, they ask me a lot of questions, and I end up giving them my email address. And over the years, I get a lot of requests, and the good news is I'm usually able to point them in the right direction or send them a PDF of a report if they want it. Because they're all out in public. It's sometimes a challenge to find them.
Yeah, but here in Brazil, one central rule for the scientist is that the only can decide who understand. So only can decide about nanotechnology who understand the nanotechnology. So the public, general public that don't understand can participate of the decision.
Yes.
And the scientists that never talk with the people that don't know about nanotechnology, so the people will continue don't know nothing about nanotechnology. So only will continue to decide the scientist. So the society is good to put the money, but it's not good to participate of the decisions.
Oh, that's always true. You're right. I mean, even if they put out money to get public input, you wonder whether they ever take the public input seriously. You know, there's here in the United States where the Food and Drug Administration is waiting until May 18th to close public comments on releasing bioengineered mosquitoes in Florida to see if they can have an effect on the population of Egyptine mosquitoes carrying Zika. And I mean, the public wants to think that if they give their input, it will have an effect on the decision. But you notice when you're talking to the public about it, they're very skeptical. They're not sure anything they have to say is going to be taken that seriously. And that's really unfortunate. But you're right. What we need is not just getting information out to the public, but getting good information out to them and enough information so they can participate. I mean, I always tell the public, they don't need to know how to do the lab experiments. That's not what they need to know. They just need to understand what effect these experiments may have on the way they live their lives. And that's what we need to start stressing and making available to the public. But that's a whole different type of writing. You know, I've written for public audiences before. It's a different type of writing. And scientists and engineers are really not trained to do that very well.
Here, in relationship to the newspapers or TV news, in general, is similar a press release of the communication department of the university or the laboratory. Only put the things that the will occur in the future. In the future, you have this product that will be so good for your health. So it's this
But, you know, I noticed here in the United States, we have a big project here at North Carolina State. We hire experts in science communication, and we're trying to produce the next generation of science communicators, right? That's what we're trying to do here. It's also being done at schools like Arizona State and other universities around the United States as well, like George Mason out in the DC area, Northeastern up in Boston. So there are a bunch of universities who are trying to figure out how to improve science communication. And I'm hoping over the next 10 years, we might actually start graduating some professors with solid degrees in science communication. Because scientists and engineers always ask for our help. They always want someone to help them craft a message. And I think we realize that now, that there's so many experts that it's difficult to craft an easy message, and they need our services more and more. I'm hoping over the next 10 years we're able to generate a new generation of kids who can stand up and do this.
Yeah, but here in the TV companies or in newspaper companies, is very difficult. You find a journalist that is journalist from science communication.
Oh, that's hard. I'm with you. That's incredibly different. There are not many of them. There was a period back, maybe 20 years ago, where I had a list of about 40 or 50 of these from across the entire world of science and technology journalists that were in the top of their field. That list is down to a handful. Right? There are science and technology journalists they're just not around like they used to be. I think with the internet and the collapse of all these newspapers, I think the market for them is just dried up. And so you really don't see many science and technology journalists anymore.
Yeah, in general, he's a young journalist that he has to make some different things of things to write for the newspapers. So he have to write about the dogs, about the science, about the football, about the. So it's a.
Yeah, it's an awful challenge. Newspapers and TV have not been effective outlets over the last 5 to 7 years. We've seen them becoming less and less effective. Now, that leaves us with the internet, so we need to figure out a way to use that properly. You know, I love the fact that there are videos available on the internet. I find my students enjoy watching as much as they do reading. I'm really pleased that more and more information is available. But now we need to coordinate it. And hopefully, I'm doing this for the next 5 years for sure. So the next 5 years, we're going to try to put these clearinghouses together. Hopefully that will help. But it's going to take work by everybody. And we need a lot of interest in science communication for this to be effective.
Here, we produce 6 comics about nanotechnology. Comics for the general people and for the workers, metal workers, chemical workers, and so on. So it's one way to try to put some information about nanotechnology for this kind of the audience.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you. I think we need to do many, many, many things. I think we need to do outreach to the younger students. I think we need to do outreach to the general public. I think we need to do videos. I think we need to have a good internet presence. I think we need to do a lot of things. And to coordinate that is a huge challenge. And we've been very lucky on getting funds to help us here in the United States from the NSF to do that. I'm expecting us to continue to be funded over the next 10 years to do it effectively.
But here for this process of communication, he doesn't have money from nanotechnology funds.
Yeah, well, the key to this might be for us to work more closely together, right? I mean, the issues in Brazil and the issues in the United States associated with nanotechnology are almost identical, right? They're just on different scales. And I think if we get the world community of science communicators to work effectively, that's the way to handle this.
Yeah. We are finishing our program, and thanks so much for your contribution. I hope he will have new opportunities. You told about your research that is doing research. When you have something to do about this research, he can do another program.
Sounds good.
To put this for us. And also, if you have time in the interest about the World Social Forum, you have activity there.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks, Paulo.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.